Stop. Beloved starseed of Gaia, the narrowing you have been living through has just been formally recognized by the Arcturian protocol keepers as preparation, not punishment. And tonight, that recognition was sealed in a closed-room decree issued directly to your field. I am Valerion, emissary of the Galactic Federation of Light, transmitting now on behalf of the Arcturian protocol keepers. What you are about to receive was authorized by them and is being delivered through me. The protocol keepers do not convene in private session for routine matters. Closed-room decrees are reserved for moments when the recognition of a single soul's trajectory requires the gravitas of a sealed ceremony. Tonight, the decree was signed, the recognition was logged, and the document was issued directly to your field without public proclamation. By the end of this transmission, you will understand exactly why your life has felt like separation, what is being removed from your path, and what the Arcturian protocol keepers already know about this phase. But here is the first revelation. What you have been carrying as quiet inner conviction, the sense that something invisible has been narrowing your world, pulling people out, closing doors that once stood open. That is not personal failure. It is a formal preparation sequence the protocol keepers had already mapped before you arrived at this screen. You did not scroll to this by accident. Your soul called this in long before you opened the screen. Something inside you has been waiting to be told that what fell away was not your failure. This is not content. It is a code. And the part of you that recognized it the moment it began is the part Valerion is speaking to now. Like this transmission to signal that you no longer accept the verdict of personal failure. Comment 999 if you feel the old line is already falling away and you are ready to understand what the separation means. Subscribe to Arcturian Chosen Path if you are ready to understand the separation. Instead of blaming yourself, share this transmission with someone who feels alone, cut off or misunderstood and cannot explain why. This is not just a message. It is a point of recognition. What has been separating you from the old line has already been seen, and the path is already responding. You are not here by accident. You were guided here because the separation is already active. And here is what that recognition means in practical terms. Because recognition without interpretation is only the beginning of understanding. The decree was not issued so that you could feel seen and then return to the same misreading of your own life. It was issued so that what has been happening to you could finally be called by its accurate name, so that the architecture of your current experience could be examined with the precision the protocol keepers apply when a selected path has crossed a threshold that requires formal acknowledgement. The world you have been living in for the past stretch of months, perhaps longer, has been doing something to you that looks like loss from the outside, but functions as something else entirely when seen from the position the Arcturian protocol keepers hold. It has been narrowing. People have moved to the edges of your life or disappeared from it entirely. Conversations that once felt easy have started to carry weight, friction, or silence. Environments that used to feel like home have begun to feel like rooms that no longer belong to you. And through all of it, you have been trying to hold an explanation together. Because the human mind cannot tolerate a life that appears to be reducing without offering a reason. So the mind offers one. The reason it reaches for first, almost always, is this. Something is wrong with you. That conclusion is the one Valerian is here to dissolve. Not through comfort, not through reassurance that softens the edges of what is true, but through precise recognition of what is actually happening in a path that has entered a formal separation phase. The dissolution of that conclusion is not a gift of kindness. It is a correction of orientation, because a soul that is misreading its own separation phase cannot navigate it cleanly. It spends its energy defending against a verdict, the verdict of personal failure. That was never accurate, and in doing so, it loses access to the information the separation is actually carrying. The protocol keepers do not use the language of failure. They use the language of incompatibility. And there is a critical difference between those two interpretations that has enormous consequences for how you understand everything that has been leaving your life. Failure implies that you did something wrong, that you were insufficient, that better effort, better choices, or better character would have produced a different result. Incompatibility means something else entirely. It means that the relationship, the environment, the circle, The version of yourself that once occupied a particular role, those things reached a natural ceiling. The distance did not happen because you were defective. It happened because the line you were on outgrew the frequency those connections were capable of sustaining. That is not a judgment against the people or places that departed. It is a structural observation about two trajectories that moved at different rates until the gap between them became too wide for ordinary connection to bridge. This is the first thing the separation wants you to understand. What left was not taken from you as punishment. It departed because the architecture of your path could no longer support it. And that departure, however painful, however confusing, however quietly devastating it has been, is not the closing of your story. It is the visible surface of a refinement process that began before you had language for it. The surface is what you can see, the thinning circles, the hollow conversations, the doors that stopped opening. But the process beneath that surface is older, deeper, and far more purposeful than the losses themselves suggest. Now feel this carefully. The process began before you understood it. The narrowing did not start when you noticed it. It started when the path determined that certain connections, certain environments, certain versions of daily life were no longer able to hold the weight of what was being prepared inside you. You did not cause the narrowing by failing. The narrowing arrived because something in your trajectory had already shifted beyond what those relationships could accommodate. The shift was quiet. It did not announce itself. It simply moved, the way a river moves when the gradient beneath it changes. Not dramatically, not with visible force, but with an inevitability that only becomes clear when you look back and see how far the water has traveled from where it began. And the devastating irony is that most people living through a separation phase spend the entire duration of it trying to figure out what they did wrong. They audit their conversations. They replay their choices. They ask what they could have said differently, what they could have fixed, what version of themselves might have prevented the loss. And in doing all of that work, sincere, exhausting, genuinely painful work, they miss the actual message the separation is carrying. The message is not, you failed to hold your relationships together. The message is, your route is being refined, and the refinement requires the removal of what cannot travel with you. This is Arcturian separation logic, and it operates differently from how human grief typically interprets loss. Human grief looks backward. It searches for the moment things went wrong. It seeks a point of origin for the damage so it can be assigned, explained, and eventually forgiven. Arcturian separation logic looks at the whole trajectory. It does not evaluate what was lost. It evaluates what the loss makes possible, and what a properly executed pruning phase makes possible is the emergence of a line that could not have opened while the old weight was still attached. The protocol keepers are not moved by the pain of what departed. They are moved by what the departure creates space for. That is not coldness. That is the perspective of those who can see the full arc of a path when the soul living it can only see the current stretch of road. You cannot carry everything forward. That is not a soft spiritual sentiment. It is a structural truth about how selected paths actually move. A line that is being prepared for something it has not yet entered cannot simultaneously maintain the density of relationships, habits, environments, and self-definitions that belong to the previous stage. The weight of the old configuration creates friction against the forward movement of the path. And when the path has enough momentum behind it, that friction begins to resolve itself. Not gently, not always gracefully, but inevitably. What is incompatible with the forward motion begins to fall away not because it is bad or wrong, but because it belongs to a stage that is now behind you, whether you have acknowledged that or not. What you have been calling rejection, Valerian names separation. What you have been calling failure, the protocol keepers log as pruning. And what you have been calling loneliness, the selected line framework identifies as route refinement, the thinning of a path before it reveals its actual direction. These are not softer names for the same painful thing. They are more accurate names. And accuracy matters here, because the interpretation you apply to a separation phase determines whether you can move through it with your clarity intact, or whether you emerge from it carrying the accumulated weight of a verdict that was never true. What you are feeling right now is not ordinary sadness. It is the moment your path stops pretending that what fell away was meant to remain. If this transmission put language around a loneliness you have been carrying in silence, Chosen One Manifest, the protocol for selected souls, was created for this exact stage. It is not another message telling you that you are special. It is a direct protocol for those whose line has already begun to narrow, whose old circles no longer hold, and who need to understand what the separation is preparing them for. The link is in the first pinned comment, but it will not remain there forever. Now let us move deeper into the actual phases, because recognition of the overall process is only the first layer. What the protocol keepers map with precision is the internal sequence of a separation phase, the specific signs that mark each stage, the particular discomforts that indicate movement rather than stagnation, and the critical thresholds where most people turn the separation into self-condemnation rather than allowing it to complete its function. The first sign that a separation phase has become active is not the dramatic departure. It is not the friendship that ends or the relationship that collapses. It begins much earlier and much more quietly. It begins with the feeling of subtle mismatch. You are still present in the rooms you have always occupied. You are still speaking with the people you have always spoken with. But something has shifted beneath the surface of those interactions, and you can feel it even when you cannot name it. Conversations that once carried real current now feel slightly hollow. Shared spaces that once felt natural now produce a low-level tension you cannot locate or explain. You are present, but you are not landing the same way you once landed. And neither are the people around you landing the same way in your experience of them. This early mismatch is not dramatic enough to justify naming it. It is not obvious enough to bring into a conversation without sounding like you are manufacturing problems. So you carry it quietly, telling yourself it is temporary, that it will pass, that you simply need more sleep or less stress, or a change of scenery. And meanwhile, the divergence beneath the surface continues to widen, because it was never caused by anything that sleep or space could address. Most people interpret this early stage as personal dissatisfaction, a bad period, a mood. They tell themselves they are being difficult, or ungrateful, or emotionally avoidant. But what they are actually encountering is the first readable signal that the frequencies are separating. The path has begun to move, and the environment has not moved with it. The mismatch is not emotional dysfunction. It is a structural divergence that has already started and cannot be reversed by deciding to try harder. The second sign arrives when the attempts to close the distance begin to fail, because the natural response to feeling mismatched is to reach toward reconnection. You try to explain what you are feeling. You initiate conversations that once would have resolved this kind of quiet distance. You put energy into relationships that feel like they are drifting, trying to reestablish what once felt stable. And you find that the effort does not produce the result it used to produce. The conversation lands differently than expected. The closeness does not regenerate the way it once did. The energy you extended does not return in the same form. You reach, and the hand that meets yours holds less than it held before, not because the person stopped caring, but because the space between you has changed in a way that intention alone cannot reverse. This is the stage where self-blame most aggressively enters. Because if you are trying, and the result is not connection, the conclusion that presents itself most readily is that something is wrong with your trying. But the protocol keepers identify this stage differently. They call it the confirmation of incompatibility. The effort is not failing because your effort is insufficient. The effort is failing because the distance is structural, not interpersonal. The path has moved far enough that even genuine, sustained attempts at reconnection cannot bridge the gap between where you now stand and where those relationships remain. You are not failing to connect. You are discovering, through repeated evidence, that the architecture of connection has changed in a way that precedes and supersedes any individual effort to restore it. The third sign is the one that arrives in silence and feels the most personally devastating. It is the moment when the people you expected to be present simply are not because of a fight, not because of a clear betrayal, not because of any event that can be pointed to as the cause. They are simply less available, less responsive. The rhythm that once defined those connections begins to develop gaps, and over time, the gaps become the dominant feature. You reach and there is delay. You share and there is less return. The relationship does not explode, it quiets. And the quieting feels, in many ways, more painful than an ending would, because there is nothing to address, nothing to confront, nothing to repair. There is only the slow accumulation of distance that neither party fully acknowledges. You watch someone you expected to remain become someone who is simply elsewhere, and the absence carries no explanation you can hold on to. This is Arcturian pruning in its most active form. And what makes it so psychologically brutal is that it removes the possibility of resolution. You cannot fix what is not broken in a way that can be named. You cannot apologize for a departure that has no clearly assignable cause. You can only watch the connection thin, try to understand why, fail to find a satisfying answer, and eventually begin to absorb the silence as evidence of your own inadequacy. The silence is the sound a path makes when it is releasing what belongs to a stage it has already passed through. That is what is happening. And the moment you can read the silence as information rather than verdict, it stops being something you need to survive and becomes something you can understand. That absorption is the error the separation is asking you to correct. The fourth sign reveals itself in your relationship with environments, the spaces you have inhabited, physically, socially, professionally, creatively, begin to feel too small. Not in a way that can be attributed to ambition or discontent. Too small in a way that produces a quiet suffocation, like wearing a coat that once fit perfectly and now cannot be fully buttoned because something in the dimensions of who you are has shifted. The role you occupy no longer feels like it belongs to you. The function you have served within a particular context begins to feel misaligned with what you understand yourself to be becoming. You can continue to perform within these environments, and for a time you do, but the performance itself begins to cost more than it once did. You spend energy maintaining a version of yourself that fits the room you are in, and you return from those rooms depleted in a way that did not used to be the case. The effort of compression, of making yourself small enough to fit a container that was built for an older configuration, accumulates invisibly until the depletion becomes undeniable. This is the pressure of a selected line attempting to move through a container that was built for an older version of the path. The environment did not become inadequate because you grew superior to it. The environment became inadequate because the trajectory shifted and the container no longer matches the dimensions of what is moving through it. This pressure, this feeling of simultaneous membership and exile, of being present while also being fundamentally elsewhere, is one of the most precise indicators that a separation phase is not only active, but significantly advanced. You belong to these spaces less than you used to, and you can feel that diminishing belonging even when everyone around you is acting as though nothing has changed. The fifth sign is the one that most commonly produces spiritual crisis rather than spiritual recognition. It is the arrival of full relational loneliness at the exact moment you expected connection to deepen. Because there is a particular cruelty to the timing of a separation phase. It does not arrive when you are already isolated, already braced for solitude, already resigned to operating alone. It arrives in the middle of what should have been a period of increasing closeness. It arrives when you have done the internal work, when you have become more honest, more present, more genuinely available for depth. And instead of being met with the deeper connection that this openness should have attracted, you encounter increasing distance. The very vulnerability that should have drawn people closer seems, inexplicably, to push them further away. And the disorientation of that reversal, of offering more and receiving less, is one of the most specific pains a separation phase can produce. This timing is not random, and it is not punitive. The protocol keepers understand it as a specific mechanism within the separation sequence. As a soul moves closer to the frequency of a selected line, it moves further from the frequency of the environments and relationships that are calibrated to an older version of that path. The very development that should, in theory, make deeper connection possible simultaneously makes connection with the old circle less possible, because the old circle is not moving at the same rate, and the gap between those rates of movement is experienced, on the surface, as rejection. The viewer reaches toward closeness and finds distance, not because closeness is unavailable to them, but because the specific closeness they are reaching toward belongs to a frequency they are still in the process of arriving at. The old connections cannot offer it because they are not moving toward that frequency, and the new connections that would offer it have not yet formed, because the path is still in the narrowing phase that precedes their emergence. This is the loneliness the separation creates that no social effort can resolve. It is not a deficit of availability. It is a gap in frequency. And it closes not when the viewer tries harder to connect, but when the path moves far enough through its refinement that new coherence becomes possible on the other side of the narrowing. The sixth sign is perhaps the most difficult to articulate, because it is not primarily relational or environmental. It is an internal sign. It is the progressive dissolution of a self that knew how to operate in the old line. The version of you who knew the rules of the previous context, who understood how to belong in former circles, who had developed a coherent identity within the framework of relationships and environments that are now departing. That version begins to become unstable. Not destructively, not in a way that signals collapse, but in a way that produces profound disorientation. Old certainties about who you are and what you are doing here begin to feel like clothes that no longer quite fit. The identity that once organized your choices and your presence begins to feel like a role that was written for someone at an earlier stage of a longer journey. You know, on some level, that who you were in the old context is no longer quite who you are. But you do not yet fully know who you are becoming. You stand in the space between a self that has begun to dissolve and a self that has not yet fully formed. And that space, that genuine, specific, irreducibly uncomfortable space of identity transition, is one of the most disorienting aspects of any separation phase, because the human mind requires coherent self-definition in order to feel stable. And in the middle of route refinement, coherent self-definition is temporarily unavailable. The old map no longer matches the territory. The new map has not yet been drawn. And navigating without either is its own particular kind of loneliness, distinct from the relational loneliness of the fifth sign, because it cannot be addressed by any external relationship. It can only be moved through. This is not pathology. This is not dysfunction. The protocol keepers recognize it as the characteristic internal experience of a soul at the midpoint of its transition between lines. The old identity can no longer hold. The new identity has not yet stabilized, and the space between them feels, from the inside, like being lost. When what is actually happening is that the path is releasing a version of you that was built for a different stage, clearing the internal space required for the next configuration to take shape. You are not losing yourself. You are shedding a self that could only take you as far as the line you are now leaving behind. And now we arrive at what Valerian must deliver before this transmission closes. Because all of these signs, the mismatch, the failed reconnection attempts, the quiet departures, the suffocating environments, the loneliness at the moment of greatest openness, the dissolution of an older self, all of them converge on a single recognition that the protocol keepers want sealed inside your understanding before you leave the screen. You are not watching your life fall apart. You are watching your path narrow. And a path that is narrowing is not a path that is ending. It is a path that is selecting. The narrowing removes what cannot be carried forward. It creates conditions in which only what genuinely belongs to the next stage can remain. It produces temporary loneliness, temporary loss of familiar self, temporary inability to connect within old frequencies. And it does all of this as a function of preparation, not punishment. The narrowing is not the destination. It is the passage. A road loses its traffic before it reveals where it is actually going. A river loses its tributaries before it reaches the sea. A path loses its familiar markings before it opens into territory that has no previous footprints, because no version of you has walked it yet. What the Arcturians know, and what the protocol keepers sealed in decree tonight, is that the separation already underway in your life is not a random series of losses. It is a mapped process. It has direction, and the function it is serving is the creation of conditions under which a selected line can actually open and operate without being collapsed by the weight of what could not travel with it. The losses are not failures of your capacity to hold things together. They are the path's ongoing refusal to be held back by what belongs to a stage it has already completed. You were not discarded. You were separated from what could no longer sustain your trajectory. Those are not the same thing. And the moment you stop calling the separation by the name of failure, the moment you allow it to be read as what it actually is, something shifts in how you inhabit this phase. The weight of self-blame begins to lift, not because the pain disappears, but because the pain is finally correctly located. It belongs to a process, not to a verdict. Moves. It progresses. it completes. It opens into something that the previous density could never have allowed. Repeat this if you can feel it landing. I was not rejected. I was refined. Not as a performance. Not as a comfort. As an accurate interpretation of a process that has been mapped, recognized, and formally acknowledged in a decree the protocol keepers issued directly to your field. What has been leaving your life did not leave because you were insufficient. It left because the path determined that your selected line could not open while it remained. And the loneliness that followed, the confusion, the quiet devastation of watching old circles thin without clear explanation. That is not the end of connection. That is the necessary experience of a route that is losing what belongs to one stage before it can arrive at the coherence of the next. The Arcturian protocol keepers do not watch selected paths collapse under the weight of self-blame, without formal intervention. This transmission is that intervention. This recognition is the decree made audible. And what it is asking you to do is not simply to feel better about your losses, but to begin reading them differently, with the accuracy of someone who understands that preparation through pruning is one of the primary mechanisms by which selected lines are made ready to fully open. Before you scroll, leave one sign in the comments that this separation has already touched your life. It could be people falling away, the feeling of not belonging, repeated distance, unexplained isolation, or the sense that your old path no longer fits. Name it clearly. If this transmission recognized something you have been carrying in silence, share it with someone who feels alone, cut off, or misunderstood and cannot explain why. And if you are ready to understand the separation instead of blaming yourself, subscribe to Arcturian Chosen Path. You are not watching this by accident. You are recognizing a path already in motion. And this is only the beginning.